It's a wonderful sunny day in Sweden, and you, ladies and gentlemen, are welcome to another episode of Rewind and Play. Now, as some of you may know, I backed the Brawler 64 Kickstarter campaign and recently made a video about that controller. Now, the N64 has a bit of an awkward controller, as a lot of you may know. That is why the Brawler 64 exists. So today I'm going to talk about four different controllers for the N64. Four of the most interesting ones that you might want to pick up. Now, I'm going to start off with, of course, the real N64 controller. And, oh, also, before you say anything, this episode isn't actually inspired by Nintendo's similar video, although you should check that out too. It's pretty cool. I actually planned this episode and the Brawler 64 video as soon as I saw the Brawler 64 campaign. I just am very sporadic with my content. Anyhow, the N64 controller. As I said before, a lot of people don't like this thing. First off, it's very well known that the analog stick wears out quite quickly. And also, a lot of people find the ergonomics confusing, especially the three grips. I personally don't understand that. I mean, you know which buttons you're going to use. You grab onto the grips that are the most comfortable. But still, a lot of people don't know how the N64 is played and they just find it really weird. The upshot of this thing is, however, that it is ridiculously common and cheap. You can find loads of N64 controllers on eBay. Still lots. Never used, complete in box. And you know, there's a near infinite supply. The N64 was made in, I believe, like 40-ish million copies, and a lot of people had bought more than four controllers during the lifespan of the console. And there are replacement sticks. So if you buy a controller with a worn-out stick, if you're a bit handy and you have the proper tools, it's not the end of the world. It's very well adapted to all games, and one of the cool things about this is actually it's ambidextrous for some games. Not every single game supported the use of ambidextrous controls, but GoldenEye, Perfect Dark, and I think a lot of other FPS games allowed you to hold it both like this and like this. There was a bit lefties had a bit of a difficulty to get to the A and B buttons, but the D-pad and C buttons were sort of interchangeable. So that's a very cool thing. Now, the reason that the N64 controller was shaped like this is that this was released in 1996-ish. I don't have the exact numbers in my head, but at the time, Nintendo weren't certain if 3D was a thing that would be sort of the staple of future gaming, or if it was sort of a newfangled fad that would go away. So the idea was, for 2D games, you would be able to hold it like this and use a D-pad, and for 3D games, you'd hold it like this and use the C-stick. And that's kind of true. I believe that Mischief Makers is held like this, and also South Park Chef's Love Shack is used like this. Now, the thing is, a drawback with the controller, beyond, of course, the ergonomics, is that it's a bit tight to hold like this. Some people feel that it's a little bit cramped. But beyond that, this is a pretty cool controller. It was available in every possible color under the sun, including these cool dual-tone versions. And another thing that's cool is I personally think that these grips are the most comfortable on any system ever. Yes, I'm saying that. It's more comfortable than the Switch Pro pad, it's more comfortable than the Xbox 360 controller or the PS4 controller or whatever. This still stands. The grips are more comfortable to hold. They're more adapted to the shape of your hand than pretty much any other controller grip until this day. Now, there were several different companies that tried to find solutions for this problem. And the first one out was SuperPad. This was made by several different manufacturers. It was either known as the SuperPad or the Mako Pad, depending on the manufacturer. The SuperPad has a strange stick design that differs from Nintendo's own stick. I'm not quite sure whether this is more or less durable. It sort of feels more precise, although the stick has sort of two axes, so you feel that you're moving in, you're sort of countering two different springs that give way at different, pressures. So it's hard to make smooth movements, and it's also a bit too sensitive, I think. It was very hard to play games. I bought this controller because I was hoping that I could make a bold video where I would make, this is the ultimate controller. No one's ever heard of it. I'm first. This is so awesome. But truth be told, it's not what I expected. I mean, holding it, the grips are way too flat, and the entire controller is basically at an angle. So when you want to use the C buttons or the D-pad or the stick, the movement on the screen doesn't correspond to what you're trying to do or you think you're doing. So that's a big downside. It's pretty well made. I mean, it's got a slow motion feature, it's got an auto fire feature, the D-pad is pretty good. As much as I wanted this to be amazing, it just never was. I never got used to using this thing. I mean, first off, it's asymmetric in a different way than the standard N64 controller. This grip is sort of like a worse version of the PS1 grip, while this bad boy over here is sort of, I don't know, it's like it's even bulkier and more awkward than holding the Duke or a Dreamcast controller or any controller that's known for being too big and, awkward to hold. Also, using your middle button finger to press the trigger feels really weird in first-person shooters and stuff like that. Yeah, it's just very awkward. I mean, the upside here is that if you have a friend who's confused with, the N64 ergonomics, and this is okay, I guess. Also, the stick is in a very awkward position. It's not comfortable to use the stick at all. I think this is better suited for like fighting games and pretty much nothing else. That's my idea. So this does not get a particularly high score from me. And also, it's actually quite pricey. It's way more expensive than a standard N64 controller. So my verdict is don't buy this thing. Next we have, of course, the Brawler. And this is perhaps going to be a bit of a repetition of what I said before, but in my previous video. But this controller was kickstarted by a company called Retro Fighters. They made controllers for the SNES and the NES and so on. I believe that they also made something for the Saturn and Mega Drive, but don't hold my word on that. But this controller is supposed to be based off basically the Switch Pro controller, and it really feels like holding a Pro controller in your hand, including the very long press on the Z buttons. It pretty much feels like you're pressing an analog trigger, although it's, to my knowledge, not analog. The stick is of very high quality. It feels very modern and very, very good and very nice to hold. It's very precise. I think that the sensitivity is spot on. Yeah, it's a very well executed controller in all remarks. I'd like to have it in the same two-tone that my N64 controller is, and that my actual favorite console is, the one I usually use. But yeah, this is a great controller. All of the buttons feel like they're in the perfect position. The C buttons are a bit larger to make it more user-friendly or usable in fighting games. The D-pad is, as far as I can tell, even better than the original D-pad, which is kind of weird because Nintendo invented a D-pad and they had basically all the money in the world to throw at the N64 controller. I would have liked to have, this sort of grip angle I really liked, or the ridge shape that I really like on the original N64 controller. But yeah, I can't recommend this thing enough. It's awesome. The Retro Fighters logo looks a bit cheap, but I'm really nitpicking here. Also, there's a weird thing that when you press the analog stick to a certain position and hold the L button at the same time, you sort of feel the L button interrupting your analog stick movement, and you actually have to get in touch with Retro Fighters for them to send you a replacement, which you have to, unscrew the entire thing and replace the current button. But, yet again, picking. There are very few N64 games where you actually do, press the L button and use the stick at the same time because of the sort of design of the original controller. Last and not least is basically the holy grail of retro N64 controllers, or sort of improved, updated N64 controllers. This is the Hori Mini. It was released in Japan only at the very tail end of the N64's lifespan, and these were insanely popular there. They were available in pretty much all colors that the original N64 controller was. They had a stick more reminiscent of the GameCube stick. I'm not sure if they got it from the same manufacturer or they just looked at, E3 footage and went, oh, I really want that on my controller. But yeah, this is a very popular controller. It's very sought after. Basically, all N64 aficionados got these because they were just so gosh darn cool. And I think that actually, I'm going to be a bit controversial here. I think they're a bit overhyped. Of course, of all the video controllers in this video, this is the only one which retains the N64 controller's iconic and very comfortable grips, but it's ruined because of the hump right here for the rumble pack. When you grab it, your fingers sort of jammed into that tight space, and it's just not comfortable. And also you have this thing because of the D-pad, and that also interrupts when you grab onto the controller. You can't quite wrap your hands around it unless you have very small hands. The D-pad is in the middle, which sort of makes that ambidextrous, but I think it's in a position where it's not comfortable regardless of which hand you use. Another big problem with this controller is the stick sensitivity. It's way too sensitive. It makes aiming in GoldenEye really jerky, and the turning in Mario Kart or whatever also very jerky. I'm sure that there are some games where it's not as much of a problem, and it may even be an advantage, but I haven't found one yet. And maybe if you fiddle with the sensitivity settings, it'll get better. But by default, this is way too sensitive. On the upshot, this is a very durable stick design. This is the same design as was used on the GameCube and perhaps even the PlayStation and more modern controllers. But yeah, this is a really nice controller. It's a durable, and as a collector's item, I still think you should get it. It's a cool thing. It's something all N64 collectors should have, but if you want the optimal N64 experience, either use the original controller, because that's how all games were meant to be played, or get the Brawler 64, because that's the most reminiscent to a modern ergonomic controller you're going to get. So, to summarize, the Super Pad, not good at all. Don't get it. It's overpriced. It's not comfortable for anyone. It's a curiosity. It's one of those cool, interesting, quirky things, but don't get it. The Hori Mini, yet again, collector's item, yes. It's cool, it's awesome, it's quirky, it's Japanese. It's an icon. It's something that people were rushing after a few years ago, and hopefully the Brawler 64 will make the prices drop on this thing. And yet again, the Brawler, it is bar none the, I think, best controller. It might turn out in a few years that the quality was bad, but I haven't heard anything like that so far. And the N64 Classic controller, if you don't play that much, or if you want to play it just, just the way it was back in the day, use the Classic controller, buy these replacement sticks, which often are of superior quality. I think that, so those were my opinions. And this is probably going to be the last N64 video for quite some time. In the near future, when I make videos, it's probably going to be about the Switch. It's just because I think I've covered pretty much everything about the N64. But if you want me to make more N64 videos, leave a comment in the comment section. And of course, please subscribe, please like, please share. The more likes I get, the more support I get, the more active I'm going to be here. So until next time, have a nice day, and may the N64 be with you. May the 4th be with you.